Hello everyone, welcome back to Clinical Psychology Community UK. My name is Holly and today we are going to be talking about supervision feedback and project logs, all of this sort of stuff. The reason we're going to talk about that is because it was requested in the comments. So thank you so much for engaging in the comments and letting me know what you want to see. This is a specific response to a request. I am currently working in the NHS as an assistant psychologist, and this is all of these different logs are things that I use in my everyday work life to help me reflect on things and help me progress. So let's get into it. Today we are going to think about why should we use these logs? Why should we monitor everything that we do? I'm going to introduce each type of log. So that is supervision logs, feedback logs, and project logs. I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of practical advice and some helpful resources that are out there. So let's start with why use logs. So for me, I am I like to monitor things and write things down because my memory is not that great. I often struggle to remember really specific things. So I like to keep a record of everything. This was actually suggested to me in one of my first supervision sessions as an assistant psychologist, is to keep a log of things that you're working on, some of the projects that you're doing, some of the feedback you've received, and supervision. So you can kind of reflect on it differently. So firstly, it keeps a clear record. Okay, so it gives you like a snapshot in time. So I can look back and say, right, what did I discuss in my supervision in June last year? Well, I know what I did because I've recorded it. It also aids your reflections. So if you're thinking, okay, so I learned this thing in supervision, or my supervisor referenced this specific model or something like that, let me go and check it out and reflect on it. And that can be really helpful. Or equally, you can look back over all of your supervision sessions, and actually that can be a reflection in itself. What have you learned from supervision? If you didn't have a log, you might not remember all of the specific things that you spoke about in supervision. It also, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you know that I am all about that reflective portfolio life. So you can do them as part of a reflective portfolio. So it really helps you think about things differently. And it helps you to process experiences, and supervision, any projects that you're doing. It helps you kind of almost get a step away from it all and get a bit of perspective because you're writing it down. And it's only personal, it's just for you, but you're able to get a little bit of a different perspective on things, I think anyway. And it supports progression. As I've said, a lot of reflection does support you in your progression and your development. But recording things kind of objectively also helps, because as clinical psychologists we will need to be able to assimilate a lot of different data and a lot of different ideas and communicate them succinctly and concisely, so it can help you with that, definitely. That's my experience of it. Now we're going to get into each specific type of log. So the first one I want to talk about is supervision logs. And this is the first one that my supervisor recommended that I start. Essentially, they're just helpful ways to record your discussions in supervision. And it's mainly just for your own reflection and also so you've got a record of it. So if you've got a supervisor that changes their mind a lot or can't quite remember what you've discussed in supervision before, then that's really helpful because you can look back and say, oh, actually, I remember we talked about this. And also, if your memory isn't great, like mine is not great, it helps me to have a track. Your log can have the date, it can have the supervisor that you had the supervision with, the method of supervision. Like at the moment, I always put whether mine was Teams or face-to-face, what the discussion was, and what your reflections are. It could have something about your reflections in there as well. You can have whatever columns feel important to you. Okay, I'm not prescribing to you what you need to do in your own supervision log. This is just some stuff that I've come up with that's really helped me. You can have whatever you want in there. So here's an example. this is going to look like a massive table. It's on a Word document that I use, and I've given you an example. Okay, so in this one, I've got, starting right at the top, I've got the job that I'm in. So that's really helpful if you're doing it as part of a portfolio, because you're able to then look back at all the different jobs. And then starting with the date column, so I've got the date of the supervision, really important. Got who the supervisor was. My supervisor was Minnie Mouse, so I'm very lucky there. The discussion that we had and the reflections that I've got. So let's say my supervisor was Minnie Mouse, and in the supervision on the 10th of Feb this year, we discussed a supervision agreement. You can put as much detail in there as you want, but for me, I'm not replicating any other information. So we've made a supervision agreement, and it's probably signed or agreed somewhere else, so it doesn't necessarily need to be in here. We've introduced ourselves to each other. We've had a bit of a discussion around the role and the service and any sort of action plan that's around, and some discussion around reflective models. And then I've given specific examples that we spoke about. So my reflections there were that I was really excited to start supervision in a new role, and I was sort of having to manage the anxiety and feelings of imposter syndrome and wanting to prove myself. That was difficult, but also happy to have some practical advice, on things to research and learn about to help me in my career progression. So that is a very basic example. I did not think it was fully appropriate to put an actual example from my supervision log in there, because my supervision is quite personal to me, and my logs and reflections are quite personal to me. So I didn't want to share exactly that. But that is a good example of an initial sort of log entry that you could have. But remember that nobody is going to read this. So it's really up to you, whatever you find helpful. And you might realise, your supervision log might start like this. And then as you progress through supervision, you might realise, actually, I think another column in there might be good, you could add a feedback column, or you could add, I don't know, anything that seemed relevant for you, basically. Let's move on to project logs. So this again was a suggestion from my supervisor. A project log essentially is a helpful way for you to record all the work that you're doing. It's really helpful for interviews and applications where you're asked to give, specific examples of your work, your experience, your skills, your competence. If you can, when you're preparing for an interview, look back over all the work you've done in that role, then it's far easier to pick out an example than it is just to randomly try and think back. It also aids your reflections, obviously, because you're able to see all of the work that you've done, and it's useful to look back on. So I, in preparation for this, looked back over my project logs and actually realised that I'd done quite a lot of work. And I don't know, it was just an interesting reflection for me, that I'd done a lot more work than I thought I had, potentially, and a lot more important work than I thought I had, particularly throughout COVID. I fully recommend doing one of these, and I wish I'd done them throughout my previous roles. I've only started doing it really since I was an assistant, and it's very hard to do retrospectively. So when I think back to my previous jobs, it's very difficult to do that, and I think I'd really need to take significant time to do that, which I don't really have. So I'd encourage you to start doing it as soon as, particularly at university. I think that could be really helpful if you're currently studying for your undergraduate or a master's. Think about the projects that you're doing, the work that you're being asked to do, and what it brings up for you. Think about that. So here's an example. Again, got the job at the top, so you can, again, if it's part of a reflective portfolio, you can think about that. Then I've got dates, the project, my reflections, and then any skills or competencies that come out of that. And that mainly, the skills column, is mainly for when you're thinking about interviews. So if you're asked in an interview, give me an example of a time where you were involved in a service evaluation project. Okay, well, this example can help with that. So the project was an intervention evaluation based on recorded outcome measures, and the interventions were psychoeducational courses. So some of my reflections were, and some of this is loosely based on me when I started my AP job, felt good to be doing something related to psychology. That is definitely me. That was factual. Good practice for small and larger service evaluation projects on the doctorate, because those are projects that happen on all of the courses I've applied to anyway. That's all I can speak for on the doctorate. Enjoyed doing the data analysis, did have to use some SPSS books to refresh my memory. Again, that is autobiographical. I felt nervous about presenting the evaluation to my supervisor, but it was good that the project felt helpful to the service. And there was a realization that I actually want to feel helpful in my work and that's quite important to me. And in the reflections, or in the project, you don't necessarily have to have the whole project. You could have planning the intervention evaluation and a box, row for that. And then you could have conducting the evaluation, doing the data analysis. You could do that. I've done it this way because this is what works for me. So then in the skills, a few of them, the most important ones I picked were sort of data analysis, data collection, write-up, reporting, and service and intervention evaluation. So those are really important things that I will need to be able to do if I ever get onto the doctorate. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Project logs can be massively helpful, and I would fully encourage you to start doing that in your current role. Definitely start doing that, because when I look back, I wish I'd done it in other roles. So I was able to talk more succinctly in interviews about that work. I feel like I can in my AP job because I've been doing this since the start. So I feel like it's easier for me to pick out work that I've been doing as an AP in interviews and things like that. And the last one I want to quickly talk about is feedback logs. Again, this was a suggestion from my supervisor, and essentially it's a log to record any feedback that you've had on project, on work, on presentations, and supervision, on your practice, on anything really. And it can be useful to keep an objective record of that feedback, which can support your reflections. And what I mean by that is, quite often when we get feedback, it goes through the prism of our brains before we then reflect on it, if that makes any sense. But what you can do when you get feedback is try and write down the exact words that someone gave you in feedback objectively in that log. And then you've got an actual, as objective as possible, record of that. And then you can start to put it into your prism and internalize things. Because a lot of the time with my default anxious position, I automatically think I've done something wrong, or that it's not good enough. So when I get feedback, I'm almost looking for that feedback that tells me that I'm not good enough. I'm looking for that confirmation that I'm right in my head and that I'm not good enough. But actually, if I write down all of the objective feedback that I've received and then review it again when I'm feeling a little bit more confident or positive, I realise that actually that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm biased towards the negative feedback. And that prompts a really interesting reflection for me. So I'd encourage you to do this as well. These are the 3 logs that I really think can be helpful. And here's another example. Minnie Mouse comes back as well. She's my supervisor, obviously. So the source of feedback is in there with the dates, the type of feedback, the content of the feedback, and the application to practice and some reflections. So what we're doing here is we're making a record of where it came from, when, who, how, and why it's important. So I think that's, we're going through the whole process there. It's not just about getting the feedback, it's about how that then applies to your future practice, which is something you will be doing when you get onto clinical training. You will be getting lots and lots of feedback. You have to internalize it and make sense of it, and then adapt your practice and learn and develop. So I think the earlier you do this, the more practiced you'll be at it. So looking at this example then, Minnie Mouse gave me some feedback in supervision. It was verbal and written feedback. The project was a literature review write-up that I'd done. Again, this is not really autobiographical, this one. It's just sort of semi. So the language used, making sure that the language would be used in a published journal article. And that, some of the suggestions were to review published literature reviews for language and the tone that's used. Presentation of information, considering, having a table containing all the key information. But actually, what else could be in there? That might be my bias when I was writing this example. Another thing could be good content done, effectively, efficiently, good use of time, got this back to me very quickly, you fed it back really well. It could also include that. So then looking at the application to practice and any reflections. Well, what we're mainly talking about is managing anxiety of receiving feedback. That's my own issue. In whatever feedback I ever receive, I'm constantly anxious about it. And remembering that feedback is helpful and constructive, and that actually we are in pre-qualified roles, and that's all the way up until you are qualified, generally, and then you're a junior psychologist. We're here to learn. It's really important that we develop and learn, and we're not going to be perfect at everything, and that's okay. And again, helpful to compare work to publishable standards, so you're kind of preparing for that doctorate. I was going to say pressure, but that doctorate expectation of you to publish. Hopefully that gives you a little example of what I mean by a feedback log. Again, I'd massively encourage you to do it. It's something that I've been a little bit lax on in my own life, but it's something that I definitely see the value in, so I would definitely encourage you to do that. Let's move on to a little bit of practical advice. Firstly, I can't impress this upon you enough. In anything that you do what works for you. Try some things out. I will make sure that the templates are available to you. Move them around, add bits, take bits away, whatever works for you. This is all about you and your professional and personal development. So whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong way, really. Make sure you record the date. This is very helpful because, when I'm looking back over my supervision log, I remember roughly the time of year it was when I had a specific discussion, the biggest lessons I've learned in supervision. But it's helpful to record the date so you can kind of contextualize that experience a little bit. And if you're going to choose only one log to do, choose the supervision log. Definitely. Unless you're not receiving supervision, in which case probably look at the project log. But if you are receiving supervision, keep that supervision log. It's so useful. And it's really helped me develop a good relationship with my supervisor and develop my own relationship with receiving supervision and learning how to engage in it. So I would absolutely encourage you to do that. Here's some helpful resources. If you join the UK Deakin Insight Applicants Reflective Space, it says YouTube, it's meant to say Facebook. I'll put the link in the comments. If you join on Facebook, then I will make sure that all of the templates will be on that group, and the templates from all our other videos are available there too. You can also check out all of our other videos. We've done so many at the moment about reflective models and loads of other things. So check those out. And create your own templates, create your own ways of working. Absolutely, that's what I'd encourage you to do. That's what I did. So I'd encourage you to do that too, whatever works for you. So a summary then. Logs are helpful. They provide a structured way to record your experiences, work and discussions. You can reflect on what you've learned over time and do what works for you. Those are the main points. I hope that really helps. And thank you so much for the request that we had for this video as well. And I hope that it helps not just that person, but other people in their development. If you want to get involved, follow us on all the social medias. We are on Facebook, we are on Insta, and we are on YouTube, as you can see. And make sure you subscribe to us. I hope my singing helped you click subscribe. And if you want me to sing more, then potentially I will. Make sure you pop in the comments whether you enjoyed the video or if there's any other ideas for videos. I'm super up for responding to that. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and join us next week for another video. Take care. Bye.